Hello, welcome to my Getting Started with Citrix ADC webinar. In this webinar, I'm going to demonstrate how to take an ADC from a blank to business-ready state using ADM Service. I'm going to cover the following topics: deploying a new ADM agent using ADM Service into my VMware environment, deploying a new ADC instance, connecting that ADC instance to ADM Service, licensing the new ADC, deploying a best practice base configuration, and then deploying a business service, in this case, a load balancer. Before I begin, I'd like to cover a little about the architecture of ADM Service and the components that we'll touch on within this webinar. Citrix Application Delivery and Management Service, ADM Service, is a web-based solution for managing Citrix ADC deployments. ADM Service is hosted within Citrix Cloud, and the Express Edition, with 500 megabytes or 1 day of data storage, is available without cost, provided your account remains active. You can use this cloud solution to manage, monitor, and troubleshoot your entire global application delivery infrastructure from a single unified and centralized cloud-based console. After you sign up for Citrix Cloud and start using ADM Service, you will install agents into your network environment, or you will initiate the built-in agents within ADC. You will do so to connect the ADCs to ADM. Then, after the ADCs have a connection, you can add the ADCs to ADM and start managing them. In this webinar, we will focus on using ADM Agent, and I will demonstrate how to form these connections. I'm going to start by logging into my Citrix Cloud account. My Cloud account is a normal user account. This isn't a Citrix internal account. This is just me as a standard user. So I should see the exact same things that you will. As I log in, I need to use my Google Authenticator token. I'll just feed that in now. And then I should get a series of tiles appearing in front of me for the various services that I've subscribed to. I've got quite a few of these as a demo, but the one we're looking for is Application Delivery Management, or ADM. I hit Manage on here. So let's start by clicking Add Instances and choose Custom Deployment. Under Custom Deployment, we've got a range of deployment environments. We choose On-Premises. We will select Traditional and press Next. I can now say that I want to download the agent to run on a hypervisor. Press Next here. I drop down and I'm going to choose VMware from the list and download image. I'll give that a couple of minutes. And while it's downloading, I'm going to take a copy of the service URL under Setup Agent, and I'm going to take a copy of the activation code and just copy that into the clipboard. I'll go put that down in Notepad. You can't see that on the screen, and I'll take a copy of that activation code and I put that in Notepad as well. We can move over now to my VMware environment. The agent has downloaded. Let me just drag that onto the screen. We open up the compressed zip file that we've just downloaded. If I double click the OVF file, it should automatically import into my VMware environment. Click Continue on here. Now, of course, your VMware environment will look very different to mine if you're not running your lab environment on macOS. Customize settings here. I want to set the network interface on my platform to Ethernet, and we will leave the rest of the settings on their defaults. Press play. I can boot up the ADM agent. Let's go and feed in some settings. I'm quite happy with the host name for the purposes of this. Let's give our environment an IP address. Set a net mask. Set a gateway. And we will set a DNS server. Ordinarily, your DNS server would be an internal server, but I don't have one set up in my lab environment. This would be NS root. Then I can run deployment type. enter the service URL. Now the service URL will be the URL which I pasted into Notepad earlier on. Let me just go and grab that. I've pasted in the service URL. Now I need to put in the activation code as well. Now I've pasted in the activation code as well. Just hit enter to that. Now I need to change my password. The ADM agent will now restart. This may take a minute or two, so I'm going to speed the video up here. And there we have it. The agent has restarted. I now log out, and the agent is ready to use. If we now move back to our ADM cloud environment, we can hit Register Agent. We see the settings of the agent. We click on Next. We select the agent, and we select an instance type, and we can specify the IP address of the ADC. Now that ADM agent has been imported, let's go ahead and create ourselves an ADC. I've downloaded the latest ADC firmware. We can unzip the ADC firmware for ESX, double-click the OVF file to import. Again, I'll change the network settings so that we're on Ethernet. I'm going to check the CPU and memory. There should be 4 gigabytes of memory. Wait for the ADC to boot up. I'm going to speed this up a little bit on the video as well, so you're not waiting for it. Let's give our ADC an IP address. And a netmask. And a gateway. Save and quit. Now we could connect the ADC to ADM Service at this point, but I don't like leaving anything with the default password. So let's log in as NSRoot with the password NSRoot, and we are prompted to change the password. I will go ahead and change that password now. We are logged in. I'll now log out, saving the changes. Excellent. We now have a new ADC with a changed password ready to be imported into ADM Service. With our ADC now imported and available to us, we can specify the IP address of the ADC within ADM Service. We can then create an instance profile. I have an instance profile that I've previously used for authentication, but we're going to create a new one here. I'll call the instance profile lab test. Ordinarily, you would use a Surface account for ADM authentication. Here I'm going to use the NSRoot username and password you saw me set a moment ago. The SNMP configuration will depend on your corporate policy. However, at a minimum, you would have a secure community string. Create profile. And now we can add the instance. ADM Service will now connect to the ADC using the ADM agent. Upon connection, ADM Service will authenticate to the ADC using the credentials that we provided, and then we'll configure the ADC to connect to ADM Service using the agent. You'll likely remember from the diagram at the beginning of this video that ADM agent is used to allow connectivity from the cloud service to the ADC. Within infrastructure instances, we can now observe the ADC that we have just added. Within infrastructure instances agents, we can observe the agent that we have just added. If we wish to perform a firmware upgrade at this point, we could select Infrastructure, Upgrade Jobs, and create a new upgrade job to upgrade the ADC. We don't need to do this, as I installed an ADC with the latest version of firmware. Next, we need to install a license. We achieve this by choosing Infrastructure, Pooled Licensing, and ensuring that the license files for our ADM service are installed. You will observe that I have installed license files providing platinum bandwidth and a number of instances. If I choose Infrastructure Bandwidth Licenses, I can also see that no licenses are currently used. At this point, I could connect to each of my ADCs, in this case one, and direct it to use the ADM agent as its license server. This would work without issue. However, if I had a large number of ADCs, this could also be quite time-consuming. Instead, I will automate the task by choosing Infrastructure, Configuration, Configuration Jobs, Create New Configuration. I will create a new job called License, and in the parameters, I will add an NS license server using the IP address of the ADM agent, and I will set the ADC to have a capacity in the units of gigabits per second with an amount of bandwidth of 1 and using the addition platinum. You will of course wish to edit these commands to represent your own licensing flavor. I will now apply this to my instance, but of course you could apply it to a large number of instances if you wished. Although the licensing commands have executed without issue, the ADC will need to be rebooted before the licenses take effect. We can reboot the ADC by choosing Infrastructure, Instances ADC, ticking the ADC, selecting an action, and choosing Reboot. Once the ADC has rebooted, it will have the appropriate licenses installed. By choosing Infrastructure, Pooled Licensing, Bandwidth Licenses, we are now able to see that our ADC is consuming licenses. We should install a trusted SSL management certificate onto each of our ADCs. Select Infrastructure, followed by SSL Dashboard, and Install Certificate. Select Certificate from Certificate Store, choose the certificate option, and press Add. Here I have the capability to install an SSL certificate from ADM Service onto my ADC. I'm going to choose a certificate. I'm going to use a self-signed certificate that I created earlier. In your environment, you would use an SSL certificate signed by an internal certification authority trusted by your management devices. A trusted management SSL certificate is required so that the browser will not produce warning messages and so that administrators do not become accustomed to agreeing to such messages. I will now install the certificate onto our ADC. The certificate has now been installed onto the ADC, and we can use it by referencing the name that we provided later. Citrix has documented generic best practice configuration settings within TechZone. We could create a configuration job which implemented all of the various options which were appropriate in your environment. A pre-created configuration job containing the generic best practice settings from TechZone is available for download for the primary and secondary nodes. The prerequisite commands mentioned within the TechZone article are also available for download. If we select the primary template, then we have the option of downloading the raw file. I'll download the raw file by clicking on it with my browser. With our best practice configuration template downloaded, we can now import the template by choosing Infrastructure, Configuration, Configuration Templates, Import, and selecting the template file. In your environment, you will be deploying an HA pair. As such, you will need to import both the primary and secondary templates and run them on their respective ADC nodes. As I am only installing a single node, I will remove the set RPC command defining the RPC node password for the secondary node I do not have. I can now apply the settings from the template by choosing Configuration Jobs, Create Job, dragging and dropping the templated commands, and setting a name for the job. Next, I select the instances that I want this configuration job to apply to, and now I either populate each of the various settings, or in the case of applying these settings to a large number of ADCs, upload the variables from a configuration file. I need to set the name of an SSL certificate to use for management purposes. Here, I use the name of the SSL certificate that we installed earlier. Finally, I set a new username and password to use for ADM so we can move away from authenticating ADM Service with the NS root user account. Each of the commands to be executed is now displayed. I choose to execute the job now and press Finish. I can now observe the execution status. The screen will periodically refresh. As we can see, the base configuration has now executed successfully. Each of the various commands has run without issue, and I have a best practice configuration applied to my environment. You will note that we created a new user account for ADM Service. To set ADM Service to use the new user account, we can select Instances, Citrix ADC, select the ADM instance, choose Edit, and edit the admin profile. The admin profile, of course, is defining the username and password used to authenticate ADM Service to the ADC. With our ADC now available, we can use a stylebook to simplify the task of creating and managing configuration. We can access stylebooks by choosing Applications, Configuration, Stylebooks. Stylebooks are templates which include declarative configuration in a pre-prepared form, allowing you to complete common activities. In this example, we will create a load balancing service. We will achieve this by choosing the HTTP SSL load balancing stylebook and selecting Create. We can now feed in the various details necessary to create the load balancer. Now select the ADC we wish to apply the configuration to. And on clicking Create, the configuration will be first validated by ADM and then applied to the ADC. We have now finished building our blank to business-ready best practice ADC configuration, and we have a business service which is ready for our users to consume. If you have any questions about items in this video, please don't hesitate to get in touch.